I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic community in true crime. The Russ case is fascinating and convoluted from a legal strategy perspective. Should Baldwin take the stand? For his own sake, I think he should. Will Hannah testify? Why didn't Baldwin testify for Hannah? Should Baldwin be seen as an actor, a producer, or both? Well, the judge has already ruled on that one, and I have to say, I think it's a questionable and disappointing ruling. Probably the shit show circus that was the Karen Reid trial is still ringing in her ears. That's the judge's ears. And she wants to make sure this case doesn't go the same way with a hung jury and a mistrial. Complicated cases can go that way. And while I wouldn't say this case is all that complicated, it's not as simple as it seems either. In this analysis, we're going to look at 5 legal pickles that the prosecutors and defense and perhaps the jury have to deal with in terms of this particular case. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you are finding the analysis worthwhile and interesting, there is a playlist of 114, I think, episodes, so check those out. Also, don't miss the Rex Heuermann deep dive sequel on Saturday. The full version of that will be in members only. And let's get started with this analysis. So, 5 legal pickles. Number 1, why Baldwin should testify. Baldwin has made many inconsistent statements, and even though it's likely the famously inflammatory actor could be cut to pieces in cross-examination, I do think it does make sense for him to go on the stand. Now, I wouldn't say that about anyone, and I wouldn't say that about most defendants. So why does it make sense for him to testify? So first of all, I think it made sense that Hannah, the armorer, didn't testify, and I think it made sense that, for example, Karen Reid didn't testify. But I think it makes more sense to have Baldwin testify. Why? Well, because he's an influential, charismatic person, and in a courtroom, that counts for something. He's not just influential, he is a well-known figure. He's let's say, a household name in America. Pretty much everyone knows who he is, and all it will take is for his personality and his legacy to hypnotize one juror. You know, if he can do that with one juror, then he's won. Now, I'm not sharing this. I'm not making this suggestion because I'm on Baldwin's side or because I want him to win. It just makes sense from a legal efficacy perspective. So that's really the angle that I'm coming in. It's just really saying, wow, it's quite an interesting case. And from this perspective, this strategy actually makes sense. Now, if you think about it, this strategy worked for Johnny Depp, and he gave terrible, unreliable, and often incoherent testimony on the stand. Guess what? When it comes to celebrities, that doesn't matter. That brings us to number 2, divorcing the producer role. Now, if I was a prosecutor on this case, I would have a real problem having to excise the whole producer aspect. Because let's face it, that was a reality here. And it goes to Baldwin's actual responsibility, because he had dual responsibility, which arguably makes him doubly invested and thus doubly liable. This alone is already a big win for Baldwin's defense team. Now, according to Deadline, quote, on the eve of Baldwin's involuntary manslaughter trial for the 2021 killing of Russ cinematographer Helena Hutchins, the multiple Emmy winner just scored a big legal win. Well, indeed he did. Over arguments from prosecutors, a New Mexico judge has determined Monday that Baldwin's role as a co-producer on the troubled indie western cannot be entered as evidence into the July 9 starting trial. She said the following, I'm having real difficulty with the state's position that they want to show that as a producer he didn't follow guidelines, and therefore as an actor Mr. Baldwin did all of these things wrong that resulted in the death of Ms. Hutchins. because as a producer, he allowed these things to happen. These were Judge Mary Marlowe Summers' words. That's what she said in a pre-trial motion hearing that was taking place in Santa Fe. Now, the prosecution's counter to that also makes perfect sense. And this is what they said. Baldwin's other hat as a producer made him keenly aware of his responsibilities on set. And those were the words of the special prosecutor, Erlinda Johnson, in her unsuccessful pitch. Now, she gave a very, I thought, concise, compelling, personable, effective opening statement today. I thought she did a really good job. The defense, meanwhile, have basically played the whole ball of who else is responsible or who else could be more responsible, and then also, to some extent, undermining law enforcement. Now, I do think that Baldwin's role as a producer should have made him more keenly aware of his responsibilities. But the judge ruled the probative value is not substantially outweighed by unfair prejudice and confusion to jurors. So the judge does seem to acknowledge the probative value. There is probative value, but she feels that it might be confusing to jurors. I don't know, is it really that confusing? That brings us to number 3, Trixie legal shenanigans. If the defense scored a major victory, it's also true that they have suffered a slew of defeats. They've tried over and over and over again to get the case dismissed. According to Deadline, quote, Baldwin's defense lawyers who have failed over and over to get the matter tossed out are putting a spotlight on allegations that prosecutors have not been timely in handing over certain documents in the discovery process. Whoa, what a horrible, what is this? This is terrible. Meanwhile, Baldwin's side hasn't been too timely in other issues either. And according to Deadline, funds from tax incentives were to be used in part to pay Helena's widow, Matthew Hutchins, as part of an October 2022 settlement. Payments that are long overdue, according to those in the know. So while they're quibbling about these documents that are late, the much more important issue, which is her widow, isn't being paid either. Number 4, will Hannah testify? Yes, but she will probably invoke her Fifth Amendment. According to Deadline, Gutierrez Reed is on the state's witness list, although it is unlikely they will get much from her as the ex-armorer invoked her Fifth Amendment rights repeatedly during a pre-trial interview for the Baldwin case. And that brings us to the fifth and last aspect that's quite interesting. Imagine if Baldwin had put his weight behind Hannah when she was on trial. During the armorer's trial, Baldwin, knowing he would be next to go on trial, he could have testified as a defense witness, basically inserting himself and defending Hannah's actions. And I think this may have done a great deal. You know, this could even have led to the jury finding her innocent. And if she was found innocent, you know, it could have either led to have her getting a lighter sentence or her getting off completely, which would have paved the way to Baldwin getting off. On the other hand, this could also have landed Baldwin into legal jeopardy. Firstly, because he may have endorsed Hannah based on his position as a producer, which would have rendered the producer issue moot in this trial. Secondly, if Baldwin gave the armorer his support and the jury still found her guilty, this wouldn't bode well for Baldwin. Worse still, Baldwin would have made statements under oath in a court of law, which could then be used against him in another court of law, this one, even before he'd opened his mouth. Now, when I was in Santa Fe last year, I drove to Bonanza Creek Ranch and I couldn't help noticing the irony of the signs along the side of the road, pass with care. There are multiple signs repeatedly exhorting passers-by to pass with care. And the crew, including Baldwin and the armorer, would have driven to the set each day passing these pass with care signs. And at the end of the day, they'd drive past them again on the way home. If Hannah and Baldwin had only passed the firearms with care, passed the firearms onto someone else, handled the firearms with care, handled them more carefully, Helena would still be alive today. And I have to say, when I was watching the body cam during the morning session of trial day 1, you see Hannah, she's still alive, she's still moving somewhat feebly, she lifts her hand. It's really tragic seeing her in that situation because it was so unnecessary. And so think about it, what is the opposite of not being careful enough? So as I said, these signs saying pass with care, be careful essentially. What's the opposite of not being careful enough? It's recklessness. It's negligence. That is what this trial is all about and what Baldwin is going to be tested for. What do you think the outcome's going to be? What do you think the outcome should be? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for trial day 2.